Switching out the computer here, I'm going to invite our next speaker up. Her name is Cheryl DeLuca-Johnson. She serves as President and Chief Executive Officer of Street Grace, an organization that mobilizes community resources, financial, human, and material, to help individuals and organizations effectively fight domestic minor sex trafficking, DMST. Through awareness, empowerment, and engagement, Street Grace is working to end DMST in Atlanta with a vision of ending it throughout the United States so all children can live happy, healthy, productive lives that are free from injustice and exploration. So we're going to invite Ms. Johnston as soon as we can get her mic'd up here. I had the privilege of hearing her speak. I'm a school counselor, so this is certainly something that's very near and dear to my heart as we try to protect the children in our community. So I'm going to invite Ms. Johnston up.
Thank you so much, Sherry. Can you hear me? Oh. Did this get turned? Can you hear me now? No. You probably can hear me better without this. Can you hear me now? Okay. I do not travel alone. So I'm going to introduce my two partners in crime. I shouldn't say partners in crime since one's a GBI agent. But, first off, I feel humbled to follow the crowd that was just up here. I come from a family of veterans also, so I appreciate all your service. I think in the battle that we're in, we also feel like we need warriors, so we're happy that you stayed for this next part of the presentation. I did have the opportunity, and also Heather was with me, and I think the Attorney General's office was with us when we presented to Gwinnett County and all of its counselors on the topic of domestic minor sex trafficking. So tonight we're going to kind of give you an overview of what that is, a short overview, and we're going to talk about what our organizations do to help end it and what you as a community can do to help end it. I'm very pleased to be in Gwinnett County because I went to Norcross High School. I didn't go to this fancy new high school they have over here. I went to that one that I think is an alternative school now. Maybe it should have been when I was there. But I went there. My kids have been raised in Gwinnett County, and I still live in Gwinnett County. So I'm very happy to be here because Gwinnett County is actually ahead of the curve in front of other counties on this issue. So let me introduce my partners and tell you how we're going to do this. First up will be Heather Stockdale. Well, let me tell you something else about my two partners. Heather, as you can see, is going to have her first child. It could be at any time. Brian and his wife are about to have their first child at any time. So you could wind up with just me tonight. But what we're going to do is Heather's going to come up. She's with the organization Georgia Cares, which is our statewide response to those children that have been trafficked. And she's going to give you an overview of what that looks like in the state. Then Brian Johnston from the GBI is going to come up and talk about the task force that he's on and how they're targeting this, and I think he's actually going to give a case study. I will close out the presentation with telling you what Street Grace does, because what we're going to do is we are focused now on going after demand. We have raised awareness, general awareness over the past several years. We believe in empowering those that serve our children, but we know that this won't end unless we go after demand. And that's also a place where your mayor is looking at signing on to the Not Buying It program that we've partnered with the Attorney General. So that's what it's going to look like. I was supposed to talk long enough so that Heather's thing could be loaded, and I say thing because I'm so IT savvy. I think it is. Is it in? All right, you go.
Describes the work that we do, so just bear with me. Can y'all hear that? Can't hear it.
Or social media, and many are coerced by threats of violence. But regardless of how they got there, hundreds and even thousands of children are trapped in a life of sex trafficking with no way out. This isn't about strangers in some third world country. This is about children in Georgia who are being sold for sex by criminals who are experts at manipulating them. Georgia Cares exists to rescue all such children in the state who are victims of domestic minor sex trafficking, or DMST. We do this by working in 4 key areas to provide them with the care and services they need to be fully restored to safe, happy, and normal lives. What does this look like in action? It all starts with a referral. A caring person calls our statewide 24-hour hotline and tells us about a child who may be a victim. Sometimes it's an emergency in the middle of the night, and we immediately work to coordinate emergency services such as medical care and a safe place to stay. Other cases are less urgent, but once a child becomes part of our program, we provide support for as long as it takes for them to become fully restored. Our case managers work with each young person to develop an individual care and service plan based on that child's needs and their own goals and dreams. We then help coordinate any necessary services and provide monitoring and mentoring to help them down the road to full recovery. Sadly, victims of DMST are all around us. That's why we also work to raise public awareness and provide training for those who interact with children so they can recognize warning signs and take steps to get help. Our staff also collaborates with public leaders to shape legislation and policies that protect our children. We dream of a day when DMST will be eradicated from our state and ask that you will support us as we continue to bring hope to children who are trapped in a life of sex trafficking. Show you care. You can make a difference. Join the movement to end DMST. Visit www.gacares.org for more information.
Okay, so could y'all hear that on any level? Okay, good. Then my little trick with the microphone worked. So let me see the hands again for the number of people who know a little bit about human trafficking. Oh, this is a great crowd. Okay, so human trafficking, when we talk about human trafficking, it's a huge global issue, right? This happens all across the globe. You have trafficking for the purposes of sex. You have trafficking for the purposes of labor. You have the trafficking of adults. You have the trafficking of children, right, for different purposes. And then you also have foreign victims who are trafficked and domestic victims. So I don't know about you all, but the first time that I heard about the issue of trafficking, I thought of the movie Taken. Has anybody seen that? And we hear that all the time. It's like our favorite thing to hear. Right, so you think about a young child traveling abroad and being taken and trapped into the life, or you think about foreign victims who are trafficked into the United States for a specific purpose, right? That's what comes to mind when we first think about it. But it's actually very different. What all three of our organizations and what we focus on are domestic minors. So these are kids who are U.S. citizens, and specifically for Georgia Cares, we're talking about Georgia children who are being trafficked for sex. So these aren't kids being shipped in necessarily from other countries. That happens too. And these aren't kids who are getting shipped out, right? These are kids in and from Georgia who are trafficked in and around Georgia, and also throughout other different parts of the United States. So when you hear the term DMST, it stands for domestic minor sex trafficking, and that is the form of this that we're all talking about. And contrary to some people's belief, they think that these kids get involved in this because maybe they want to make a business for themselves, or they think that when they're being sold for sex that these kids are making the money themselves. But that couldn't be further from the truth. All three of us can tell you. Kids that are trafficked are trapped in this life. They're forced, they're coerced, they're tricked, they're seduced. And the traffickers, and Brian will talk to you about this, and you'll get to hear a case study from him. They're not your average Joe. Some of them are really smart. They use tactics. They know how to pick out the vulnerable kids and pick out vulnerabilities in young boys and girls. They know how to manipulate them. They are master manipulators. So another question that we get is, why don't these young boys and girls, when they're trapped and they're swept up into this life, and they realize that maybe it wasn't what they thought it was, and they're being sold for sex and held against their will, why don't they just leave? And the way that all of us answer that is that it's kind of akin to the issue of domestic violence. It's not just as easy as leaving. It becomes a cycle of violence that is perpetuated. And for these young kids, they don't know the difference a lot of times between the love and the abuse that they're being shown by their trafficker. So a lot of times, like I said, they can be seduced into this life, so they have an older boyfriend. And you and I both know that a 15-year-old has no business dating a 35-year-old, right? That's not normal, that's not a healthy relationship. But if they don't know that and they haven't been taught that, they think that that's just their boyfriend, and they'll refer to that person as their boyfriend. And really, this boyfriend is their trafficker who's selling them to other men and turning a profit on them. So that is what we're talking about when we're talking about this issue. And if you think that this doesn't happen, it happens all across our state. We have received Georgia Cares. We serve all children in the state of Georgia who are sex trafficking victims. And so last year, just to give you an idea of what we're talking about, last year we served 422 youth victims, and we received 352 new referrals for victims. So that's what we're talking about, and that's really a drop in the bucket. We know that this issue, just like child abuse, as we begin to teach more about it, we know that this is underreported. We know that a lot of people don't know what to look for and what signs to spot and see. And that's why we spend a lot of our time talking about those warning signs. That's why we spent time with the Gwinnett County Schools, working with the social workers and the counselors to say, here are the little behaviors that you can see that will trigger your mind, red flags to report this or to refer this child to Georgia Cares so that we can work with law enforcement and do an investigation to see if that child has been trafficked. So education is really key, and Cheryl will talk a little bit about that too, and that's why the three of us go around a lot talking about this issue, is because the more we travel, the more that we go out and teach people about what to see, what to look for, the more referrals we get for kids, because people know what to look for and their eyes are open to this issue. So I think it was right after we did the Gwinnett County Schools presentation, I want to say, how many weeks was it after that? 3 weeks? 3 weeks after we did the presentation to Gwinnett County Schools, we had 4 referrals for kids. So we had received 0 prior to that, and then we did this presentation, talked about warning signs, talked about what to do, and then we received 4 referrals. Those are 4 kids that we had the opportunity to help because of that. So we hope that after tonight, after hearing from each of us, that your eyes will also be open to this issue, that you'll know what to look for, and you'll know what to do. So a little bit more about Georgia Cares. You saw the video, gave you a really quick snapshot, and it told you that we worked in 4 areas, so coordination and collaboration. So I said we are the central statewide agency, so we work with their organizations and other organizations, but all child victims come through Georgia Cares. Then we do training and awareness, that's number 2, so that's things like tonight. Then number 3 is our statewide hotline. So in order to be there for victims, in order to respond to the crisis and emergencies that this issue comes up with, we'll hear from Brian about law enforcement and their work and how they immediately respond, and they do stings and operations and they recover young juveniles. Our statewide hotline is just for that. Our statewide hotline is for crisis and emergencies. So it's 24/7. We always have staff on call, and we're able to help coordinate services. So law enforcement is out in the field doing the hard work, but they need an agency like ours to help find services so that they can go after the buyers and the traffickers. And they can work their operation and they can do their investigation without worrying about what's going to happen to this child. And will they go home? Or will they get the help that they need? Or how will we make sure that this child isn't back out on the street being trafficked again? So that's what we do with our hotline, and we connect to medical services and emergency shelter when needed. And then the last thing is victim support. So after we would take a call, for example, from law enforcement, we're going to keep that child in our process. We're going to create a service plan. I think you saw that on the video. That responds to all of the needs that these kids have. They've been through a lot of trauma and abuse when they've been trafficked. And we want to make sure that they get trauma-informed therapy and clinical services to help them deal with what's happened. We want to make sure that they're enrolled back in school and that they're back on grade level in school and doing well. We want to make sure that they are connected to the community, that they have community ties. We want to make sure that we're increasing family capacity. How does the family keep this child safe? How do they make sure that this child isn't in danger again? If they're not with their home family, if they're in a group home or something like that, we want to find them stable housing. We don't want them to be moving around from here to here. So those are just examples of some of the services that we provide, but really that child stays with us, and we stay with that child for as long as their journey takes to help rehabilitate them and restore them from the experiences that they've had. And we have seen great outcomes. We've been around since the end of 2009, and we've been serving kids, and our recidivism rate, and what that means is how many kids go through the Georgia Care system and do not return to the life of trafficking or aren't trafficked again, and 80% of the children who go through our system and receive all of our services and supports do not return to the life, and we're really proud of that, because it just goes to show that when we provide the services and supports that these kids need, and when we're responsive to their needs, and when we get them trauma-informed therapy and clinical services, we can help them set a new direction for their lives. That their lives don't have to be defined by this experience that has happened to them. That that's not who they are. They're not a trafficked child. They're a child that something bad happened to, but they've been able to overcome it and set a new direction for their lives. So it's a little bit about human trafficking and what we do.